Some killers don't just take lives. They build identities around their own darkness. Tattoos carved into skin, online rants soaked in hate, rituals, fantasies, obsessions, until the line between human and monster completely disappears. Tonight, we're looking at 5 criminals who didn't just commit horrific crimes, they crafted their own monstrous personas and then acted them out in the real world. From a self-proclaimed servant of an Egyptian serpent god, to a man with horns implanted in his skull, to a grinder killer who hunted men online, this is 5 real-life monsters who became what they pretended to be.
Nico Allen Jenkins was born into chaos. September 16, 1986, Omaha, Nebraska. A family soaked in crime, violence, constant instability. By age 7, psychiatrists were already warning about him: violent ideation, paranoia, obsessions with demons and death. At 11, he was committing armed robberies. At 17, he was sentenced to 21 years for carjacking and assault with a sawed-off shotgun. Prison didn't calm him, it mutated him. Behind bars, Jenkins obsessed over mythology, demonology, ancient Egyptian texts. He fixated on the serpent god Apophis, the embodiment of chaos and destruction. Jenkins began carving and inking symbols into his own flesh: eyes, skulls, serpents, cryptic writing. He told psychiatrists he was possessed, that Apophis spoke to him and commanded him to kill. Instead of long-term psychiatric treatment, Nebraska released him. July 30, 2013, he walked out of prison. Within 6 days, the killing began. Early morning, Andrea Kruger, 33, driving home from work. Jenkins pulled her from her SUV and shot her 4 times in the head and neck, dumped her body in the road. No robbery, no connection, just senseless execution, a sacrifice. Next was Curtis Bradford, a former prison acquaintance. Jenkins lured him out under friendly pretenses, with his own sister and cousin helping. Curtis had just posted a photo on Facebook, chillin' with Nico. Hours later, he was shot dead. 2 more strangers followed: Jorge Quequija Ruiz, Juan Uribe Peña. Both killed execution style and left in or near vehicles. No real motive, no meaningful connection, just 4 murders in 10 days. Omaha was in panic. But Jenkins slipped. He left DNA at a scene, and he couldn't resist bragging. Arrested on August 30, 2013, he stepped into the courtroom looking like something out of a nightmare. Forehead inked with 666, cross between his eyes, skulls, serpents, hieroglyphs scratched and inked into his face and body. In court and jail, he screamed about gods, howled during hearings, slashed his own genitals, claiming it was a sacrifice to Apophis, filed a bizarre lawsuit blaming the state for releasing him without treatment so he could fulfill his blood ritual. He refused lawyers and tried to defend himself, turning the trial into a spectacle of rambling prophecies, accusations, outbursts in tongues. Experts argued over whether he was truly psychotic, faking it, or some twisted combination of both. The jury didn't care about his divine excuses. In 2017, Nico Jenkins was convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, plus multiple life terms. Today, he sits in isolation on Nebraska's death row, covered in more ink than skin, still filing rambling motions and talking to gods only he can hear. Insane, possessed, or manipulator? Maybe all 3. Either way, he's become a symbol of what happens when chaos is allowed to walk free and then paints itself directly onto its own face. When he walked into the courtroom, people stopped breathing. He had horns implanted under the skin of his forehead, eyes tattooed solid jet black, 666 inked between his brows, a split tongue like a snake, ears surgically pointed, a face covered in skulls, symbols, and pagan sigils. He called himself Caius Veiovis. But that wasn't the name he was born with. He entered the world in Maine in 1980 as Roy C. Gutfinski, Jr. In his 30s, he legally renamed himself after Caius, a vampire character from Twilight, and Veiovis, a Roman deity linked to plague and punishment. He didn't just want to look evil, he wanted to be evil. August 11th, 2011, Pittsfield, Massachusetts. 3 men vanished: David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell. They were housemates. One thread connected them to something much darker. David Glasser was set to testify against Adam Lee Hall, a high-ranking enforcer in the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang. Hall didn't plan to let that happen. He assembled a small crew: himself, David Chalou, and the man who called himself Caius Veiovis. They weren't just going to silence a witness, they were going to erase all 3 men. On the night of August 27, 2011, the victims were abducted, bound and blindfolded, taken to a remote area in Berkshire County. Over roughly 48 hours, they were tortured, executed, dismembered. The remains were buried and dumped deep in the woods. It took nearly 2 weeks for police to find them. Decomposing, scattered, discarded like trash. But the killers had left a trail. Investigators quickly arrested Adam Hall, David Chalou, and one name kept surfacing: Caius Veiovis. He'd driven one of the vehicles. Cell tower data placed his phone near the burial sites. Blood evidence and witness statements piled up. An informant would later quote Veiovis saying, "When you kill a rat, you make sure the body disappears or you get infected too." In 2014, Veiovis went on trial. Even hardened reporters were shaken by his appearance: those black eyes, the horns, the serpentine tongue. He sat there, calm, smirking, staring down jurors like he was enjoying a performance. He claimed the tattoos were spiritual armor. He had nothing to do with the murders. Prosecutors painted a very different picture: a willing participant in a triple killing motivated by gang loyalty and a taste for domination. A man who had intentionally made himself look like a demon and behaved accordingly. On September 29, 2014, the verdict came down: guilty on all counts of triple murder. Sentence: 3 consecutive life terms, no chance of parole. As the judge read it out, Veiovis didn't cry, beg, or flinch. He smiled. Today, he's held in near total isolation, both for his own safety and everyone else's. Fellow inmates say he whispers in Latin, scratches symbols into his cell walls, and insists he's watched by spirits. Most killers hide behind normal faces. Caius Veiovis carved his chosen face into his own flesh and then lived up to it.
On the surface, Stephen Port looked harmless. Born in 1975, raised in Southend-on-Sea, Essex. Quiet, awkward. Lived alone in a small flat in Barking, East London. He worked as a cook in a bus depot canteen, watched children's cartoons, spun stories about being rich or connected, lies that hid a much darker truth. He was desperately lonely, and he was becoming obsessed with young, vulnerable men. In 2014, Port turned to Grindr, FitLads, Gaydar. Online, he portrayed himself as younger, more successful, more confident. When men arrived at his flat, he offered them drinks, secretly laced with GHB, a powerful sedative often used in chemsex circles. Most victims had no idea what they were being given. His first known victim, Anthony Walgate, 23, a fashion student. Port hired him as an escort, then drugged him, raped him, watched him convulse and die. Instead of calling for help, he dragged Anthony's body outside and called 999, pretending to be a stranger who had just found him. Despite obvious inconsistencies, police didn't thoroughly investigate him for murder. So he killed again. Victim 2, Gabriel Kovari, 22. Port poisoned him, raped him, left his body propped against a church wall, posed to look like a sleeping homeless man. Victim 3, Daniel Whitworth, 21. Same method, GHB, assault, death. This time, Port planted a fake suicide note, claiming Daniel had killed Gabriel out of guilt and taken his own life. Police accepted it at face value. No deep forensics, no real skepticism. 3 men dead. Port still free. Victim 4, Jack Taylor, 25, a forklift driver from Dagenham. No history of drug use. In September 2015, Jack met Port on Grindr. CCTV later captured them walking toward Port's flat at 3 a.m. Jack was found dead near the same church wall. Same pattern, GHB overdose, positional staging. This time, something changed. Jack's sisters, Donna and Jenny, refused to accept the official story. They pushed police relentlessly, did their own CCTV work, found footage showing Port with Jack, footage that officers had overlooked. Their pressure forced Scotland Yard to reopen all the deaths. When police finally raided Port's flat, they discovered bottles of drugs, sex toys, laptops filled with searches about drugging and raping young men, videos of unconscious victims being assaulted. They identified at least 4 murdered victims, many more drugged and raped but left alive. In 2016, Stephen Port went on trial at the Old Bailey. The media called him the Grindr Killer. He sat through evidence, rape videos, crime scene photos, testimony from survivors, almost emotionless. The jury found him guilty of 4 murders, 4 rapes, 10 sexual assaults, 7 counts of administering a substance with intent. Sentence: life imprisonment with a whole life order, no parole, ever. But the story didn't end there. Inquiries later revealed overwhelming police failures, deaths not cross-referenced, devices not checked in time, a forged suicide note accepted without testing, key witnesses never interviewed. If Anthony Walgate's death had been properly investigated, at least 3 men might still be alive. Stephen Port didn't evade justice because he was brilliant. He evaded it because the system failed the people he preyed on. Today, he sits in HMP Belmarsh, hated even among other inmates. He weaponized dating apps, sedatives, trust, and used them not as tools for connection, but as a hunting ground.
Salford, just outside Manchester, a place known for football, tight neighborhoods, and a blood-soaked underworld of organized crime. 2 rival factions fought for control in the 2010s. The A-Team, led by feared gang boss Paul Massey, known as Mr. Big, and a splinter group determined to take back the streets. In the middle of this war stood a man with no real allegiance, just a job. His name? Mark Fellows. His specialty? Contract killing. July 2015. Paul Massey stepped outside his home on Manchester Road. A figure emerged from the shadows wearing military-style gear, a bulletproof vest, a balaclava. In his hands, an M3, grease-gun submachine gun, a weapon straight out of World War II. He opened fire. Massey was hit with 18 bullets, dying on his own driveway. Neighbors heard the shots. Some saw the killer flee, not in a car, but on a mountain bike. Fast, silent, forgettable. It was brutal.
but it was not sloppy. It was a professional execution. Police had no DNA, no recovered weapon, few reliable witnesses. But encrypted communications and surveillance hinted at a name: Mark Fellows, a fitness-obsessed loner, nicknamed the Iceman for his calm demeanor. There wasn't enough to charge him until he struck again. May 2018, John Kinsella, 53, an enforcer with links to top-level criminals, was walking with his pregnant partner near their home. He was once known for protecting footballer Steven Gerrard from gang threats. That morning, a cyclist in black rode up behind him with a Glock pistol and a silencer. Kinsella was shot, in the back, then in the head, execution style. His partner ran. The gunman fired 2 warning shots into the air and pedaled away. Again, gangland victim, public place, silent bicycle escape. Investigators dug into Fellows' life. At his home, they discovered encrypted EncroChat phones, cycling gear, and a Garmin fitness watch. That watch cracked the case. GPS data showed that weeks before Massey's killing, Fellows had quietly walked around Massey's home area, timed distances, scouted escape routes. He was literally training for the hit. Encrypted messages and phone data tied him to the Kinsella murder as well. A co-defendant, Stephen Boyle, eventually admitted he'd acted as a lookout during the Kinsella shooting. In 2019, at Liverpool Crown Court, the story was laid bare. 2 executions, 3 years apart, same methodical, icy killer. Mark Fellows sat through it all, calm, expressionless, cold. The jury convicted him of both murders. The judge handed down a whole life order, meaning Fellows will never be released. He called Fellows a contract killer of chilling ruthlessness. Today, Mark Fellows is locked up in HMP Whitemoor, spending most of his time in isolation. He didn't kill in anger. He killed with precision. And in the end, it was that same precision, the fitness watch tracking his every step, that finally betrayed him.
July 19, 2013, East Cleveland, Ohio. A neighbor called 911. She couldn't handle the smell anymore. It was coming from a detached garage on Shaw Avenue. She'd seen maggots near the door. Inside the garage, police found a plastic bag, squirming with insects, and inside that, a decomposing human body. As they searched the area, they discovered 2 more. One in the basement of a nearby home, another wrapped in plastic and dumped in a weed-choked lot near a playground. All 3 victims, young black women, strangled, raped, and hidden like trash. The man responsible was Michael Madison, 35 years old. He had a long record, a previous sex offense, a history of violence against women. But there was something else about him, an obsession. He idolized another Cleveland serial killer, Anthony Sowell, the Cleveland Strangler, who had murdered 11 women and hidden their bodies in his home just a few years earlier. Sowell was caught in 2009. Madison was arrested in 2013. They lived less than 10 miles apart. Madison seemed to be chasing his own place on Cleveland's list of monsters. His life was a mess. Drug abuse, violent porn, strangling during sex, filthy living conditions. Neighbors heard screams from his place, but no one called until the smell became undeniable. The 3 identified victims were Sherelda Terry, 18, a recent high school grad who volunteered with special needs children; Angela Deskins, 38, quiet, struggling with housing, but known for her sweet nature; Shetty Shee, 28, a young mother last seen leaving a friend's house. All of them, black, vulnerable, disregarded until it was too late.
When SWAT found Madison hiding in a nearby apartment, he was calm, watching news about himself, smirking. He vaguely admitted to hurting people, blamed his past, but showed no real remorse. In 2016, his trial began. Prosecutors detailed torture, plastic wrappings, sexual violence, a total lack of empathy. Madison barely reacted as photos were shown, families sobbed, the horror of his actions was laid out piece by piece. Then came a moment that went viral. During sentencing, Van Terry, father of victim Sherelda Terry, stepped up to address Madison. Looking him in the eyes, he said, "Right now, I guess we're supposed to, in our hearts, forgive this clown." Then he lunged across the courtroom and grabbed Madison by the throat before deputies restrained him. Millions saw that clip. Many understood the raw grief behind it. Michael Madison was sentenced to death. The judge called him worse than a predator, a destroyer of hope. He's now on death row at Chillicothe Correctional Institution, confined 23 hours a day. He wanted to be remembered like Anthony Sowell. Instead, he became just another name on the long list of men who prey on forgotten women. Women the system and society too often treat as invisible until it's too late.
Each of these men tried to become something. A prophet of a serpent god, a demon in human form, a predatory nice guy behind a screen, an ice-cold professional killer, a copycat chasing another serial killer's legacy. They built identities around their darkness, and then they acted them out on real people, with real lives, real families, and real futures. The truth is, evil doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes it tattoos itself onto a face, speaks into a webcam, adds you on a dating app, walks past you on the street, or lives quietly in the house next door. For the victims and their families, there is no full justice, only the knowledge that these men are locked away or condemned to die and can never do this again. If you're still here, you don't just look away from the darkest corners of human behavior, you want to understand them. If you want more deep dive breakdowns of real cases like these, subscribe to the channel, like this video so more people see it, and tell me in the comments, which case disturbed you the most, and do you think the systems around these men failed their victims? Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next one.